Started. All right. Well, welcome everyone to tonight's APR online study course. I'm your host facilitator, Michelle Martin, and tonight we're going to talk about RPI. And this week we are focusing on problem statements, audiences, goals, and objectives. And when I say goals and objectives, those are words that people sometimes confuse, but they're very different. So before we continue, let's go into chat and tell us in chat, what are the four components of a complete communication objective? So what should a good complete communication objective have? So go ahead, put your comments in chat, and I want to hear. Tell me, what makes up a complete communication objective? Let's see. Who does what? Yes, thank you. Who does what by when and by how much? So in this class, you'll hear us say that all the time. Who does what by when and by how much? That is a complete communication objective. And again, remember, objectives are very different from strategies. They're different from goals. They give you something that you can measure against. And yep, somebody just put in chat specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time specific. Those are what we call SMART objectives. And that is another good objective. So objectives can either be SMART. We talk about SMART objectives, which there's 5 parts to that. Or in this course, we talk about who does what by when and how much. And both of those are what you want to aspire to when you're writing objectives. So again, tonight, KSA is RPI. RPI is 30% on the APR exam, and it's so important. It's so important to understand it, to be able to practice it, just to really know it, because it's 30% of the APR exam. So tonight, again, we're focusing on audiences, well-defined audiences. We're talking about SMART objectives, and we're talking about strategies to be able to reach those audiences. And we'll get into all of those things in a little bit. The difference between, there's even a slight difference between publics and audiences. So we're going to get into all of that in just a bit. But just to talk a little bit about RPI, I know last week we talked about the R in RPI, which is research. So tonight we're in the planning process. In the coming weeks, we're going to be moving into the I and the E. But when you do RPI, think of RPI as a big circle. So you do your research, and you define the problem. So what is that problem that you're trying to solve? And so when you do the research, you find your problem statement. Problem statements are a few sentences. They're written in present tense. They should never assign blame. They should not propose a solution. You write your problem statement and you get into your situation analysis. And that's an overview of the situation. It looks at, it takes into account the research as well as any problems and opportunities that exist. And that's part of your research phase. So once you go through there, then you get in there and you start to build your plan. And that's where your goals and your objectives and strategies come in, because your goals ultimately, they tell ultimately what you want to achieve. And goals can be a bit lofty. Okay, they're more overarching. They're not measurable like objectives are. You save all that measurement for your objectives, which again, as we said, who does what by when and how much in SMART. So you set your objectives, you develop your strategies, and your strategies are how you'll accomplish your objectives. And from there, you implement your plan using tactics, and your tactics support your strategy. And when we say tactics, it can be anything from a press release, it can be an email, it can be a town hall. Any of those things are tactics, but you never jump to those. A lot of people, some people I should say, they jump straight to tactics. Oh, we're going to do a press release, or we're going to do a town hall. No, you want to be sure that your tactics are aligned with your strategies. And then when you do that, you go back and you evaluate. And when you get to the evaluation phase, you're able to look at whether you met your objectives or you didn't meet your objectives. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. And if you didn't meet your objectives, you can go back to the circle. So that's the great thing about RPI. You can go back and adjust. You can go back, you can change your strategies, you can change your tactics, but you go back in the circle, you adjust things, you can do more research. And then you go through the circle again and you can evaluate whether you are successful. So it's a continuous cycle. We'll also talk today about the 10-step PR plan, which you'll see here. And those steps come after the research phase. And this is really much of what your panel presentation should follow. So we'll go into that just very soon. But before we start, I want to introduce our APRs who will be sharing their experiences with RPI, sharing their experiences working on their APR. So tonight we're welcoming Bridget and Joy. And so I'd like to give them an opportunity to introduce themselves and tell us about their APR journey. So Bridget, I'd like to start with you.
Thanks. So I consider myself to be relatively new yet because I got my APR in September of last year. So it's still fresh in my mind. I am an old PR person, so I took this later in my career, and I'm really glad I did because I was needing to have something that was really going to push me and make me think critically. And for the years that I have left, I want to think strategically and to really be looking at how I'm doing things for my employer. So a friend of mine at my chapter said, you need to do the APR. So I've been working on it for probably 3 years. So it took me a little while. I did not pass the computer-based exam the first time. So I'm one of many that will probably say that. But yeah, I'm here to help and ask me any questions you have.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. And next, Joy. A lot of you know Joy. Joy is in chat most weeks we're here, and today we're lucky we get to have her with us on camera. So Joy, please introduce yourself.
Joy Samsel. I am a retired Navy public relations specialist when I was a civilian with the Navy. Before I was a civilian with the Navy, I did the exact same thing in uniform. So I'm a retired Chief Petty Officer journalist. I did print journalism, photography. I worked broadcasting in radio, television news. Um, so a lot of different things, speech writing, doing a lot of media engagement. Every time something happened, the media was knocking on our front door. Um, I got started on my APR journey. I had when I was stationed at Naval Education and Training Command here in Pensacola, Florida, I had a new commander come in who was the public affairs officer for the command, and we coordinated all the training for all the sailors and most of the Marines in the military. And he came in and said, you know what, there's this thing called an APR, and I'm studying for mine, and it looks really um, good as far as teaching us what we don't know, because military public affairs is a lot different from public relations. And so he said, I'm going to get the command to buy the books for the bookshelf, and anybody who wants to join me, we can start studying. And we did. Um, as always happens, life takes over, and lots of things were going on. I actually tested 3 times. The first time I went in, I said, oh, I've been doing this for 30 years. I know PR. Wrong. And then I started getting into the course, and I got this online course going, and I said, wow, it is really different. And I started learning that. And once I got it, and things started clicking. When you look at a crisis in the news and you start going, oh, they should have done this, or I would have done it this way, then you know that things are starting to click in your mind. And you can start putting the terminology that we are teaching you in this course in the RPI, and how to extrapolate that information into a scenario. And that's how you pass the test, being able to take the information from this course and use it to create a plan and troubleshoot scenarios. So welcome aboard. It's a fire hose adventure.
All right. Well, again, thanks for being here tonight. And we're going to go into some practice scenario questions. But before we do, just a few reminders here. The course is set up to let you work at your own pace. So some people complete the first, they complete one cohort and they're done. Others, 3, 4, 5, 6 cohorts, they keep going, and that's okay. It's you do it at your pace. But just as a reminder, always check your progress. And when you get to 50%, we recommend that you retake that KSA self-assessment that you took at the start of the course. And be really honest with yourself. Ask yourself, what are your strengths? What areas should you focus on more? And we always say this all the time. Be sure to do a case problem response because it's so helpful for understanding the PR planning process. If you're interested, reach out. We'll give you the tools. We'll give you a template that you can use to do it. And once you get a little further into the course, you get closer to 70, 75% or so. We have space repetition cards, and we'll give you those. All these are the tools for you to be successful when you're taking the exam and getting those questions, mastering those questions. And so we're going to be jumping in. We're actually going to be doing 4 questions today because we shifted a little bit around here today. And hopefully, depending on how things go time-wise, I see a couple questions in the chat. We will try to, if we have some time, we'll see if we can get some of those questions answered as well. So a little bit impromptu, a little different today than we maybe do usually. But with the scenario question, the scenario practice questions, as we always say, when you're on, whether you're in this class or you're taking the exam itself, really ask yourself, focus on what you're reading, focus on what the KSA is. Ask yourself, what is that KSA? In this case, our KSAs will be around RPI for today's class. And then think about some of those APR examination strategies that we've talked about in previous classes. Think about how you would approach those questions. And one thing that has been really helpful for me, and I share it most of the time when I'm doing this course, is think when you're taking the exam, put like your APR hat on there and think of yourself as that APR. And you're in this. Don't let what happens in your day-to-day in your job impact how you might answer a question. Because sometimes people will look at a question and they'll say, oh, well, no, it can't be that because that wouldn't happen where I work. Don't do that. You need to read those questions. You need to think like an APR. So in an APR world, you have an unlimited budget. You have the full support of your leaders. You have the right people in the right places. You have all of those things. So always keep that in mind. Don't let that cloud the way you the way that you would read a question. And so our first question is, we're going to start with Julie is going to read our first one. And so Julie, hold on here. Let me see. Did I put her in? I'm going to promote you to panelist. And then let me know when you're on. Hold on here. Right. While I'm doing, hi, Julie.
Did that work?
That worked. Thank you. Yes.
There you go.
So let me know when you're ready, and we'll read the first scenario practice question.
Here we go. So you just want me to read it through
Yep.
and then you'll switch? Okay.
Yep, and then I'll go to the next slide.
Okay. You are the communications director for a luxury retirement living community in a well-respected affluent neighborhood, offering a variety of new amenities to cater to today's more active, more discerning baby boomer population. For the first time, you have several one-bedroom apartments available, but your waiting list is for couples waiting for 2-bedroom apartments. Assessment of the current one-bedroom tenants shows the predominant occupants for these are either recent widows or older adults, mainly females. some who have chosen to live together in the same community. Most come from the local neighborhood, and many are members of the local Catholic community, given the facility's affiliation to its parent Catholic organization and the number of retired priests and residents. So which two of these are objectives that could be part of your plan? A, in 3 months, grow the number of qualified leads of eligible females over 75 from the 2 local Catholic parishes by 20%. B, host a series of open house events to invite potential renters to experience the community and its amenities. C, increase the number of successful apartment rentals by 5 from the resident referral program within 6 months. Pitch a story about the community's upcoming Galentine's event to the local media. Or E, assess and identify the top 5 surrounding zip codes with the highest percentage of female residents with incomes over 250,000.
Okay. All right. So go in the chat and tell us which 2 of those are objectives that can be part of the plan. And so I'm looking in chat and I see overwhelmingly A and C, it looks like. So let's see what the answer is. Oops, A, and it should be C, right?
Oh, yeah, my check number didn't come through.
That's okay. So go ahead, read the rationale and let us know the reason.
So I said these are realistic, smart objectives focused on outcomes and include a key public timeframe, measurable attainment level. They define the what, from who, how, and when. B and D are tactics that would be used to build the lead pipeline, and E is demographic research or audience analysis to identify target publics.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. And we're going to go to our facilitators now. And Bridget and Joy, tell me what you think. Is this a question you think you'd see on the exam? And if it is a question you think you'd see on the exam, how would you approach it? So I'd like to start with Joy. What are your thoughts on this?
I was looking at the responses, the potential responses, and the first one seemed to me to be more of almost an output. It was more like what you were going to be doing rather than what your public was going to be doing. And I'm not sure. Maybe it's just the way it's phrased.
Okay.
I think it's just the way it's phrased. If it were phrased slightly different, it would not. Yeah, it's just the way it's phrased in my mind.
Okay.
Yeah, it's. I think it's pretty good. I think the stem might have been a little long. From what is typically on the test. Of course, I took the test back in 2012, so it's been a while. So it might be just a little long, but maybe not.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. And Bridget, what are your thoughts on this?
So I did see a fair number of long questions. This one might be a little bit on the long side, but I did see a lot of long questions. So I think that when the reevaluation and coming up with new questions, they've changed that. I agree with what Joy said with regarding the first one, but basically the way I was able to get to the answer on a question like this is to eliminate the ones that it wasn't. So by eliminating which ones were tactics, and the one was research, and then so you knew those weren't objectives, and that only left the remaining 2, and of course looking at whether they're smart objectives. So
All right, good. Well, thank you. So we're going to go to another question, and Sharon is going to read this question.
Thanks, Michelle. You are the Communications Director for a regional nonprofit art center. One of their major fundraising and community outreach events is an outdoor art festival. Your department manages this event in partnership with a local chamber of commerce. A group of participating artists has been advocating to reduce the size of the festival. You agree it's gotten too big, but reducing the size potentially means reducing funds raised. You do your research and develop a plan for how to reduce the size of the festival, maintain funds, and communicate the change, including the why, to key publics. You need the event committee's buy-in to put the plan into motion. The committee is made up of key stakeholders who are hard to get together. What is the most effective way to share your proposed plan with them? A, send a detailed email to the committee laying out your rationale with the plan attached for review. Ask them to send their feedback via email so you have everything in writing. B, schedule an in-person or virtual meeting and present your plan. C, post a poll for the committee in a Teams chat outlining the issue with 3 options for a solution, and whichever gets the most votes will be the solution you choose. Or D, send a press release to a local news outlet informing them of the change.
Okay, go in the chat and let us know which of these 2 is the most effective way to share the plan. So let's see. Or I'm sorry, it's 1. I'm sorry, just 1.
Yes, just 1.
Yep. Okay, so I'm seeing overwhelmingly B as the answer. So let's see what the correct answer is. And it's B. So good. So Sharon, please read us the rationale.
So face-to-face meetings, they are definitely the most effective way for two-way conversation. They allow you to get real-time feedback, and you can read body language, you can kind of read the vibe in the room, and you don't get that same kind of interpersonal experience over email or in a Teams chat. And you're also apt to have some of that back and forth questions that could be handled more efficiently in person. So, and then if you send a press release announcing the change, that bypasses your entire plan, assuming you even get approval to proceed. And it goes against the standard of informing internal publics of the change first. And my pro tip is that to follow up that in-person or virtual meeting with a detailed recap in an email, including the proposal to ensure everyone has the same understanding of the conversation and the next steps.
Okay. All right, thank you. So I want to hear from our facilitator. So Bridget and Joy, what are your thoughts on this? Bridget, starting with you.
So I think this is definitely a good example of a question that I would have seen on my test and remember a few that were worded like this. And I liked how they threw in the news release as a, oh, maybe, but really remember back to your studies and what does the study tell you to do and the best practice. What is the best thing to do, because you could do any of them, but what again is the recommended way and the APR way, and the best way, not necessarily how you might do it at work, but again the best way. So I think it's a really good example.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
And Joy, what are your thoughts?
I totally agree. This is something that I think you would probably see. This is the type of question you would probably see on the test. You have to kind of think about it. You have to measure out some of to figure out which of the other responses is not quite it. Always keeping in mind that you are looking for the most correct response. And some of the questions you're going to see a lot of responses that you would do, but they don't want you to do them yet because of the way they have phrased the STEM. So what is it exactly that they are looking for? And that's why practicing to write questions, you really understand how they are developed, and it helps you when you have to tear them apart.
Good. Well, thank you. Good point. And so we have 2 more questions, and these are actually left over from a previous cohort. This one was written by Jennifer McQuilkin, but tonight Alexis is going to read it. So let us know when you're ready.
All right, I'm ready. You are volunteering with an animal shelter, and between unwanted Christmas pets being dropped off and the spring influx of puppies and kittens, the shelter is at a maximum capacity. The shelter needs to find a way to free up space as they want to avoid having to turn away animals in need. The executive director knows you work in public relations and has asked you to help them communicate with their key publics to help alleviate the stress on the shelter. Which of these 2 are objectives that could be part of the plan? A, in 2 months, grow the number of homes in the foster program by 20%. B, on social media, showcase why dogs in foster homes are more likely to be adopted than ones at the shelter. C, find new locations in different parts of the county to hold additional adoption events. D, place 6 dogs with breed-specific rescues foster programs within the next 90 days. And E, send an email to previous adopters asking them to consider fostering an animal.
Okay, so go in the chat, let us know which two are objectives that could be part of the plan. So looking in chat, I'm seeing A and D. So let's see what the correct answer is. A and D. And then here's the rationale. So Alexis, please read.
Yes, so it is A and D. These are realistic objectives focused on outcomes and include a key public timeframe and measurable attainment level. B, C, and E, these are potential strategies and tactics that the shelter can use in their plan, but they are tactics and not objectives.
Good, and we're going to go to our facilitators and Bridget and Joy. Please share your thoughts on this one. Joy.
Good, it's a good question. And it forces you to once again think about what they are looking at. Are they looking at objectives, or are you looking at a tactic in the list of possible responses? You have to keep strategy, objective, tactic, all of those portions of RPI elements in your mind while you're doing the test. And because just for this example, you're going to have to be able to weed out, no, I don't want that one, and I don't want that one, I want this one.
Thank you. Bridget, your thoughts.
I agree. The one thing I do remember is that you would see, I saw a couple of questions where they would ask you to give 2 answers, and maybe one of them would be, one of the options would be worded as it would be a strategy worded as an objective. So it'd be really close, but the key, you had to really look at it and decide, oh, is that really an objective, or is that a strategy that looks like an objective? Because a lot of times at work, that's what we do, is we really make strategies objectives and intermix those. So again, thinking back to your reading and the best answer, and not letting yourself get tripped up.
Yeah, that's a good point, and that's why in this tonight and next week and that, to really understand the difference between goals, objectives, and strategies, because they're different. But like I said, people sometimes use them interchangeably, or they don't. They're not as able to recognize the difference. So important. And then-
Michelle, I have a question real quick.
Sure.
It's been a while since I took the test. In the new test that they are giving now, do they still allow the people to do a brain dump sheet before they go into test?
So Bridget can answer this because you've taken it more recently than I have.
Yes. So there was no in-person option. It was only virtual. And while I remember being told during the cohort that there was supposed to be a place on the computer or on the screen where you could do a dump, but they never told us how to do that. And so I didn't want to take my time during the test to figure out how to do that. And so that threw me off the first time. So it wasn't what I expected at all, but it's all virtual. So it's all from home. I probably would have rather gone into a testing facility, honestly, because I think I just felt too comfortable at home. You could not have anything on your desk, right, and to take notes on. And so you had to, through your camera, show everything and show your desk and have everything removed. So no, the brain dump was not a thing.
That's too bad.
Were you able to, when you took it again though, right? Were you able to find it the second time?
No.
No?
No. And honestly, I had some very significant technical difficulties both times getting connected. The second time, when I tried to log in, there had been a change to the software. And so I was unfortunately one of the first individuals to take the test after they upgraded. And so it was I was on the phone with technical support for hours. And so that was troublesome. And so I got kind of freaked out by that. And so it just, was yeah, it just it wasn't what I expected.
So
Um,
I'll mention, so when I took it, this was because in January 2024, I think is when they changed to the new Proctor. So I took it in 2023, and at that time we had the option of going to a testing center or doing it from home. So I did it from home, but it's interesting what you mentioned about this, about the software. I tested my computer, my Mac, out the day before, and it was working fine because they had mentioned, be careful. Sometimes when people are on VPNs, which I have on my work computer, that could prevent you from taking it. So I made sure I wanted to do it on my home computer. But then when I went that morning, the next morning to do it, my Mac was not letting me do it. So thankfully the VPN worked on my work computer. But yeah, there are a lot of things, just really to like check and double check and recheck before you do it.
Yeah, and I think, just a deep breath and try not to let it, get you down and let that get in the way. And but the time does go by fast, really. 4 hours doesn't seem like it would, but it does.
Yeah, I agree. So we have one question left, and this one was written by Rick Whitham, but today it's going to be read by Jillian. So Jillian, please let us know if you're ready.
Yes, good evening. Okay, you are the communications specialist for a large county-wide school district that is seeking a millage to increase funding for special education. The result of a recent survey indicates there is a slim chance to pass a millage. Your superintendent wants you to develop a communications plan to reach out to the general public that repurposes material used in the previous millage attempt. What should you do first? A, revise the text in the previously used material with new dates for the upcoming election. B, using the survey results and demographic information, identify those as most likely to vote for the millage and develop information specifically for them. C, help the superintendent understand that the general public is composed of many specific or specialized publics with different needs. D, identify the precincts where the millage issue passed or was close to passing in the last election and focus your communications in those areas. Or E, conduct a stakeholder analysis to determine which publics are directly affected by the results of the election's outcome.
Okay, so what should you do first? So looking in chat, I am seeing a variety of different things. I'm seeing E, I'm seeing C, I'm seeing B, C, E. Yeah, I'm seeing a few different options here. So let's see what the answer is. The answer is C, help the superintendent understand that the general public is composed of many specific or specialized publics with different needs. So Jillian, please read the rationale for that.
Yes. Answer C, the general public is made up of many different publics, so material created for them might lack information that will motivate the majority. Material created for specific individual publics can be focused on information that is more likely to motivate them to vote yes.
Okay. All right. So I'd like to hear from our facilitators. There were several different answers put in chat. So tell me, what are your thoughts on this? Is this something that you think you'd see on the exam? Joy, starting with you, what are your thoughts?
It is kind of similar to some of the questions that you will see. One of the things that immediately struck me was your supervisor just wanted you to use the same messaging that didn't help the passage the last time it went up. So there's obviously something wrong with the messaging. And that's why you go in and you explain to him that there is no general public. There's lots of little publics, and we need to talk to each of them in the language and the channels that they understand. But I do think this is something that is similar to what you will see on the test, and that's why you'll see a lot of different answers here. People are going, "Huh? I don't understand. Why was it not D? Why was it not?" It's what are you going to do first? And the first thing to do is let your superintendent know that you really shouldn't be doing what he just told you to do, because it's not going to work. So
There's a question in chat. Somebody had a question and they said, I'm confused by this one. Why wouldn't we start with the research focused answer? So would that would probably be, well, D or E would be a research focused answer. What are your thoughts on that question?
well, once you get your supervisor on board with why you are not going to do what he wants you to do, then you go to the research in the RPI scheme of things. But first, you really need to let him know that there is a method to what PR people do, and it works. And if we want to be successful, we have to go about this thoughtfully. And with all due respect, sir, first I would like to do a little bit of research and see where we're going with the communications and who we need to talk to. And then you would go into the research. But first you have to get him on board.
It's what we talk about having that seat at the table. You're that trusted counselor
Exactly.
to your leadership. Okay. Bridget, tell me your thoughts on this.
I agree with that. And I think for me, the key that drew me to C was general public, because if you would have gone straight to research on that, then your supervisor would be stuck on the general public. So as the trusted advisor, you want to get that person on board with, okay, so there really isn't a general public. These are the audiences, publics that we need, and get that kind of ironed out before you start on the research, because then that's going to guide you the rest of the way. So general public helped me with this answer to stick with the trusted counsel.
Thank you. So good discussion, 4 questions today. Like I said, we don't have a case presentation today, so I'm going to go next through some module notes from a previous cohort. We'll talk a little bit about those, and then depending on how we do time-wise, maybe there might be some questions. I saw a few other questions in chat maybe we can address before we end tonight. So in the module notes, again, this was from a previous cohort. These were from Kirsten Ziembo, so we're reusing hers. So thank you if you're watching this. So this is focusing on writing a public relations plan, and that's that 10-step process that we talked about earlier tonight when I had the circle up there. And this follows from your research. So at this point, you've done your research, you have your situation analysis, and now you're really moving into that planning process. So you have your problem statement, and your problem statement is always written in the present tense. It shouldn't imply blame. It shouldn't provide a solution. You're just sharing what the problem is as it exists now. And it's a brief summary. It looks at what's the source of concern, what's the problem, where's the problem, what is it involved, who's affected, that's an important part, and why is this a concern to your publics, because again, your publics are so important in all of this. And then we go into your goals, and your goals are, again, people confuse goals and objectives and all of those things, but they're different. So your goals are broad, they're overarching. Sometimes they can be, you hear the phrase, sometimes lofty goals, they can be a little lofty. They're aspirational. They're what you want your organization to be known for. So for example, here, a goal would be, and this is out of the APR study guide, a goal would be to increase public use of mass transit. Very it's very broad, but it's aspirational and such. Okay, and then we talked about a little bit earlier, we mentioned the difference between publics and audiences. And there's a difference between publics and audiences. So publics have a common shared interest. The audiences do not. So audiences are people who in this we're saying they're more passive, they don't interact with each other. Again, they don't have that shared connection. Your publics do, and that's why when we talk about publics, you hear sometimes people use the phrase, and they shouldn't use the phrase, they talk about a general public, and there is no such thing as a general public because your publics are very distinct. They are people with a shared, there's some kind of shared connection with one another. So like it says here, publics are more about involvement and action, while audiences are about receiving information. And then one interesting thing, this comes up sometimes when I do the course, sometimes we have a little bit of a discussion with the facilitators over whether media are a public or a tactic. And in this course, we don't usually include media as a public or as an audience. Also important is that knowing who your publics are, you always want to be sure that you tailor your messaging for each public. And then here are some examples of publics. So students, alumni, this was taken again from a few cohorts ago, board members. And again, your messaging needs to be shaped to respond to the needs of your publics because you're speaking to students. While there might be that same overarching message, you may speak to students a little bit differently than you're going to speak to your board members. And then we get into objectives, and we talked about objectives a little bit earlier today. So who does what by when and how much? And so what opinion, attitude, action, or behavior do you want them to achieve? How much change do you want them to achieve? And then in what time frame? So who does what by when and by how much? And it's important to remember that, we can change opinions and attitudes sometimes, or you can, but it's far more difficult to change someone's values or beliefs. And that's actually something, if you look in the APR study guide, that is something that is called out in there. And that's something that you might see on the exam. So something to keep in mind. We talked earlier again today about SMART objectives. So specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time specific. Those are good objectives. So who does what by when and how much, and SMART. So you'll see it used both ways. So just something to keep in mind. So strategies, and again, this is one of those things where we hear people talk about strategies, and then the next thing you know, they're talking about goals and they're intermixing, but they're different. So strategies are how you will achieve your objectives. So in the APR study guide, some phrases that might be a key or a clue, I should say, to knowing whether something's a strategy or an objective or a goal or whatnot is words or phrases like enlist key influencers, position the company as, establish partnerships with. So those are clues sometimes that when you're taking the exam, you'll know those are strategies because they're not tactics. So your tactics will follow from your strategies. And here's actually more examples of strategies. So for example, foster community relationships. Well, how would you do that? Well, with tactics, you might do that through social media or town halls or those types of things. So again, your tactics all follow from your strategies. Okay, and then tactics, here are some examples. So tactics can be everything from meetings, they can be press releases, they can be social media posts, they can be online information, town halls. There's all types of things that can be publications, you name it. Those are all tactics. One clue or one tip they have, if you can do it in a day, then it's a tactic and not a strategy. So something to think about. But the important thing in as an APR is we always remind ourselves we never jump into tactics. You really need to find out what you're trying to achieve. You need to look at your strategies, and then your tactics follow that. We also have something called activities, and usually when you're doing like your panel presentation, they're combined usually with your tactics. I don't recall ever seeing activities even as a question on the APR exam. That's not to say don't pay attention to what they are, but they're more the steps that you take to implement a tactic. So, your tactic might be to create a social media post, but your activity is to create that, succession of daily Instagram stories or something like that. So those are some examples of activities, but often you see them actually combined with tactics. Another important part of your planning process is your budget. So you need to look at things like, your staff time, your out-of-pocket costs, all of these things. Those are all things that you need to look at when you're doing your budget. If you are doing your like practice panel presentation in this class, like I did, I didn't put our budget in there. I referenced it, but I didn't say what it was. I just tried to keep that quiet at the time. And then your materials, you look at what do you need to implement and execute your tactics. And then you have your timetable and task list. And this is something when you look in the APR study guide, you'll see it. It's like a grid. And you can do the same when you're doing your panel presentation. But it's really that almost like that map for who's doing what, who's responsible for it, what's the deadline for it, just so you have that flow. One tip is you can do a Gantt chart. So a Gantt chart can show how the project or the campaign or the communication plan is carried out. Gantt charts, some people create those in Excel. They color in the boxes, but then if another idea is if you have a project management system that you use at work, they will usually, if you plug in the dates, they'll kick you out a Gantt chart. And then very, very important is the evaluation phase. And so when you get to, you go through the ARPI circle, you do all of that, you do your research, you do your planning, you implement, and then you get to that the E and ARPI, that's your evaluation phase. And that is where you look and you ask yourself, did you meet your objectives? Sometimes you meet them, sometimes you don't. And if you met them, that's great. If you didn't, you can go back, you can do more research, you can adjust your strategies, you can change your tactics, you can go back and you can do it again and you can go through that circle. And that is, that's the wonderful thing about RPI. And then, you can ask yourself, did you have a change? Well, there was a change in attitude, awareness, action. Did people sign up for a program or whatever those objectives were? You can go back, go through that whole process, get to the evaluation, and you've completed the circle, or you can go back in. So that was a bit over there. So I want to talk to Joy and Bridget. So let me know. Let's tell us your thoughts on all of this, on the planning process, any tips, any thoughts, anything you'd like to add, starting with Bridget.
This is great. I'm actually going through the process right now with a campaign at work, and it's I work for Mid-America Regional Council. It's a regional council of governments, and we do the daily skycast for ozone alerts. So we have the forecast every day, and when we get to a high ozone level point in the year, which is usually in May or June, we'll issue an action alert through the media. So it's really complex. And we use a combination of an Excel spreadsheet with Gantt chart pieces to it for our timeline for our deadlines. The one thing we don't include into that is our free media, things that aren't paid. So what I'm doing is I'm merging them together into a Gantt chart and adding in our deadlines. When is our artwork due? Even though this season started March 1st, we really won't start the paid campaign until we get closer to the high season. But there were still things that needed to be done. We have to update the artwork. We have to update the website. We need to change out the social media graphics, and things like that. And then look at our research from last year. How did we do and what do we want to do? So I'm really excited to be putting that to work. That was my panel presentation as well. So I'm actually energized for it this year.
Good. Thank you. Joy, I saw you added some things in chat.
Yeah, just a couple of reminders. The big thing, I liked the notes, the presentation. People tend to think, well, everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing, so I'll just let them do it, do their job in the team, the PR team, or whoever. If you have it written down and if you have it posted somewhere where people can see the lines move for what is being accomplished and when the deadlines, what the gates that you're hitting the gates, and or you're missing a gate. Why did you miss the gate? We missed the gate because this spokesperson got sick and couldn't go to an event. Did you have a backup? Didn't think about it. Okay, that's a teaching point. Okay, who's your backup? Does somebody have the notes so you can present in that person's place? The Gantt chart or some sort of tracking system for your communications is critical. It lets you know that you are moving through the process and things are on track so that you can give an update to the higher ups. You can also, if something falls through the cracks, you know it. When somebody will notice when one of the lines is not moving. It helps greatly. Make sure that you know in your communications who your publics are, what languages they speak. If you have people in your community that you need to communicate with, who is going to do that? Not everybody listens to the nightly news. Not everybody reads the newspaper. Where are they getting that information? It may not be from your daily news, as their little community newspaper for that Greek population that you've got, or that Vietnamese population that you've got, and who are they more likely to speak with? Some publics, we may not like it, but some publics will not take information from a female. They have to have a male persona to speak with them. If you are, trying to get them to do something and they see a female telling them they ought to do it, they're going to turn around and walk away. It's the way the communities are built. We have to understand that, and we have to help them get the information. So keep those in mind as you're building your communications plan.
It's a really good point. That actually reminds me of what I did my APR panel presentation on. I worked at an agency and we did a statewide campaign to reach the historically undercounted during the 2020 census. So that was a key part of it. Who are those messengers? Because we have our just, traditional tactics of billboards and, media relations and all of those things. But it was also who are those people we were trying to reach. So it's people at the people they trust in community agencies, food banks, their pastor, their priest, those types of people. So very important. Very well said. So like I said, we don't have a case problem response this week. Again, if you're interested in doing one in the coming weeks, I highly encourage you to do that. Reach out to me, reach out to Michael, reach out to any of the other facilitators, and we'll get you on the schedule. a few things coming up here next week. We are talking about implementation. So please be sure to join us for that. That's RPI as well. That's the I in RPI. The following week, we're moving into crisis communications, and then we're getting into some of the other pieces of all of this case problem presentations as we wrap up in April. And then before I say thank you to everyone and we wrap up, I know we have about 5 minutes left here. I don't know if anyone has any questions. I'll look in chat, see if there's any of those that we can answer. Someone said, how do you reach out to the facilitators? I noodled around in the course. So when you go into the in the back end, and this is something maybe Alexis or Julie or Jillian or Sharon, who are back there more often, there's a section where you can send an email to any of us. So you search for our name and then you can send an email. So that is, I don't know if there's anything anyone wants to add about that. And then Bridget just mentioned you can reach out to her on LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn as well. I'm out there. Let's see if there's anything else. Any other questions? Oh, someone asked, it was mentioned that if it can be done in a day, it's a tactic. So if it can be done in one day, that would be a tactic. It wouldn't be a strategy, because a strategy, multiple tactics can come from a strategy. Okay. And then we'll take a look just to make sure everything's working with the email. So any other questions before we wrap up? If you do have them, put them in chat. Otherwise, feel free to reach out to us. You can, like we said, find us on LinkedIn or look for us on the back end. So as we wrap up, I want to thank everyone who joined us today. Bridget and Joy, Julie, Sharon, Alexis, and Jillian, thank you for joining us today. And, just a reminder, we're around the midpoint right now. So if you're at about 50%, go back, do that KSA self-assessment again. Be honest with yourself. What do you need to work on some more? What have you, what are you doing really well? Check that completion. And we always say, once you get to about 75%, you should be about ready to take your APR exam. Somebody just asked, can you join another cohort after this one is done? Yes, absolutely. You can do as many as you want. Summer starts, I'll have to check this calendar. I want to say it's maybe the first week in June or so, but it'll be coming up pretty soon, and we have fall and all of those. You can do as many cohorts as you want. And I think that is it. So anyway, so thank you everyone for joining us, and have a good night, and we will see you next week. So thank you.